All right, today we're looking at how, partnerships can solve most of the major problems we have in different sectors of the economy. We see Nigeria's energy sector remains one of the biggest opportunities for investment, but unlocking that potential will require strong partnerships, capital and policy certainty. So what will it take to turn Nigeria's energy opportunities into bankable investments and sustainable economic growth? Joining me for this conversation now, we have George Koroma, the delegation partner, Scottish Africa Business Association. Great to have you on the show. Good morning.
Good morning. Good to be on the show this morning.
Fantastic. So, looking at Nigeria's oil and gas industry right now, and energy industry, where do you see the biggest investment opportunities right now today?
I suppose what I can say about that is, as myself as a business analyst here in Aberdeen, Scotland, and having worked within the intersection between the Scottish and West African energy sectors, to help answer that question, right, I'll give you a bit of a background context on the market here, right? So Aberdeen, right, over 50 years ago, right, used to be a fishing town. Then came oil discovery, and that grew into like an energy capital of Europe, right? Building world-class talents, the technology, the institutions, and now the basin is mature, and the Scottish operators and investors are looking to export this expertise abroad. Now, Nigeria, on the other hand, right, the story runs parallel. Over 50 years ago, you had the international oil companies coming in, they brought the capital, the talent, the technology, and developed the assets. Now, Nigeria is at this inflection point where you've got strong local players and indigenous companies leading the charge. Now, what they need at this point is the capital and technology to develop both new and existing assets. Now, what we've been seeing, right, within the North Sea operation is that, Scottish operators have committed over the last, since 2022, we've seen about 18.9 billion of international expansions have been committed, right? And we at the Scottish Africa Business Association are keen to ensure that, West Africa gets a slice of that action. And so what we see currently too as well is, for example, Serica Energy, they currently pump about 10% of the UK's gas from the North Sea. And they became one of the latest companies, to venture abroad and had committed approximately about 45 million to a deal to acquire Ferrous Energy. And this is an example of, you've got companies here in the North Sea looking for international expansion abroad.
All right. So, definitely you did mention, technology, the need for technology and need for, capital. But have you seen a case where in this same industry, somehow, maybe you get the technology and it somehow reduces the size of capital, needed to develop? Have you seen that kind of opportunity?
So what I have also seen is, very recently, I suppose in terms of like developing fields, you've got well intervention activities, which, from estimates, you've got about 37 billion market by 2030. I suppose what we're starting to see, with technology is you've got technologies that companies are bringing into the West African market, and they're using it to optimize the wells and, to bring out more of the oil and to sell it into the market, which is very, very good, because that's technology being deployed to optimize production, which is good. And it helps us to be able to achieve the 3 million barrels per day of oil production that, we as a country has set as an ambition. So I see, from our analysis is you've got Scotland has the technology and the capital. Nigeria has the assets and ambition. Now, we're trying to make sure that we're having those fruitful conversations so we can see more of these deals happening between Scotland and the West African markets.
And most of the time, when you look at these kind of partnerships, somehow they find a way to tilt towards one side or one party here. How do we make sure both sides, get the best, at this point?
So I think to answer that one, what we are doing currently too as well. So we've got the Energy Export Conference happening in September, and as part of that, we're leading a delegation of senior West African leaders here into Aberdeen for that Energy Export Conference. Partnerships are built on very good relationships. Everyone understands, what you're bringing to the table. I suppose what we are also ensuring with this delegation is every meeting of this delegation is pre-qualified. Every introduction is purposeful. So people come in with an expectation and you leave with a beautiful relationship that can grow into something better for the future.
All right, let's look at investor confidence now. What would you say are the biggest concerns, currently holding investors back from committing, more capital into Nigeria's energy sector? Or have you seen some improvement, when it comes to investor confidence?
I would say I've seen good improvements. I suppose with the NUPRC licensing round, the 2025 licensing round, it was one of the most transparent licensing process we've seen in recent decades. And that is a huge boost, for the West, for Nigeria as a whole, because then I suppose you could say it's part of that renewed hope agenda where you've got the investors now looking to the market, having seen that process, gone through very transparent, and we can see that about 37 blocks have been awarded to 31 companies. Now, I suppose we now need to take those conversations further in making sure that, the Nigerian-Scotland energy partnership is built on very good, solid foundation. And so this is, the future is here. The opportunity is now. It's here, and we should be leveraging it.
All right. Do you see other, country partnerships that also have potential at this point?
Suppose there are lots of example use cases across the board, but what we are currently seeing is the Nigeria-Scotland energy corridor is one that is mostly underutilized, and we should be seeking to commercialize that relationship, because then I suppose there are lots of similarities between the Scottish market and also to the West African market. You look at it, we've got the same time zone also too as well. You've got people who've been trained in Aberdeen and also working in various facilities across the world. Now, given this very strong relationship that has been built over the years, and with lots of senior leaders who have also worked in the North Sea Basin, you've got a beautiful relationship that can build into something that attracts more investment into the country.
All right, and definitely a lot happening in the oil and gas market at this point. 1 week we're seeing oil prices down. The next week we're seeing it start to rise again, and we're looking forward to a deal, between the U.S. and Iran for the longest time so far since the war, started. But do these issues, do they kind of impact investors in that sector, in your opinion?
I suppose you could say it's like a blessing right now, because then folk are starting to look to other markets. Previously people had always been looking to the Middle East, for growth. Now we're starting to see a lot of interest now into Africa, which is really, really good. And we should be riding this wave and this trajectory. I suppose when you look at also too with the huge, an investment that Mr. Dangote has put, on the continent of Africa, and also specifically in Nigeria itself, it builds that confidence, that a project of this magnitude has been achieved. And, the Dangote refinery needs all the crude it can get. So as we start to unlock these assets within West Africa, particularly Nigeria, you will start to see that, investors will start to come around and, start to make those investments into the continent. Like I already mentioned, right, we're seeing North Sea operators looking to do more business in Africa. About 18.9 billion has been committed so far, in initiatives, not just in Africa, but across the world. And so we need to be riding this trajectory, tell our own stories, come to the energy export conferences, and speak about, the great things that, Nigerian indigenous companies are doing, because this is how we attract those investments into the continent.
Right. We're already seeing, a little change there when it comes to how much, the Dangote refinery gets, when it comes to feedstock. We're seeing the NUPRC reporting one thing, the Dangote refinery reporting another, what they receive. But how can a partnership like this, help a refinery like Dangote actually get the oil, that they need to give us more fuel?
I suppose, a very good point. When we look at it from a data point perspective, various, data sources, what's the golden source of truth. But the most important thing, like we are seeing, is, Scotland itself, has the technology and the capital. Nigeria has the assets and the ambition. We want to achieve 3 billion barrels of oil production by 2030. We've got very ambitious indigenous companies who have been successful in this 2025 licensing round. Now, these entrepreneurs and this ambition needs to be matched with the capital and technology that will unlock these assets. Because by unlocking these assets, then we're able to feed, the Dangote refinery with the crude that it needs, going forward into the future. And I'm sure this is very, very achievable because I suppose, given the transparency we're seeing in the market, given the recent licensing round and the transparency with the NUPRC process, that gives investors a lot of confidence and interest into Nigeria at the moment.
All right, thank you so much. I guess that's a good place to anchor it. George Okoroma is a delegation partner, Scottish Africa Business Association. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much.